Okay, thank you all for coming tonight. And my name is Sandy Golding. I'm the president of Beaches Watch. For those of you who may not know about Beaches Watch, we are a nonprofit citizens organization. We were founded in 2004. Some of you may remember the height referendum that we did in Jacksonville Beach. That's the first thing we did. But since then, our focus has been on educating and involving citizens in the issues that come before our beach communities. Because we want to enrich the quality of life here at the beach and basically keep what we love so much about living here at the beach. So we want people to stay involved in what's going on so that decisions are being made with citizen input. Anyway, so one of the things that we do is we have these educational meetings once a month, and we're very pleased to have Representative Adkins with us tonight. We're gonna get to her in just a minute, but before we get started, I want to do a few things. I hope everybody had an opportunity to get an agenda when you came in, because on the back of the agenda we have the contact information for our beaches elected officials. So if you ever have any issues, questions, or concerns, you can get in touch with Jax Beach, Atlantic Beach, or Neptune Beach officials, as well as Jacksonville. And while we're at it, let me also recognize the elected officials we have here tonight. From Atlantic Beach, we have Jonathan Doherty, Commissioner Doherty.
My phone number is on.
Oh, is it? Okay, well, give me the correct one and we'll get to Before you leave tonight, I want the right number, okay? We have Commissioner Maria Mark and Commissioner Carolyn Woods. Oh, okay? Thank you. And then from Jacksonville Beach, we have Councilman Keith Doherty.
Good evening.
We have Councilman Steve Hartmeyer and Councilwoman Janelle Wilson. There you are. Then from Neptune Beach, we have Mayor Harry Pruitt in the very back. And we have Councilwoman Kara Tucker. Here's Kara. And Councilman Scott Wiley. Then we also have the brand spanking new, but hasn't taken office yet, but President of the Jacksonville City Council, our very own Beaches Representative, Bill Gulliver. Okay, so real quickly, I want to make a few announcements. For those of you who live in Jax Beach or even in Neptune Beach or Atlantic Beach, if you want to attend, Jax Beach is having a workshop on the food truck ordinance that Jax Beach will be considering. That's next Tuesday, the 11th at 6:30. It's on the agenda, so we hope you'll take the agenda with you to remind you. There is a Beaches Branch Library community meeting tomorrow night. They're going to be talking about repairs that are going to be done to the library. That may be something that some of you may be interested in. For the Atlantic Beach people, if you're considering running for office, you have until June 21st to file and qualify, and we've got that information on the agenda. Yes, sir?
Today was the last day to file petitions.
Oh, today was the last day to file petitions.
The 7th?
Today is the 5th.
It's 2 more days.
Okay, so you have until the 7th to file petitions, and then that's it.
Unless you're running against me, it's already done.
Okay. Also, there's an Atlantic Beach candidate training that Beaches Watch is going to be hosting Wednesday, June 26th. There is a training that's being done tomorrow, I think, which is a qualifying type of training with Jerry Holland, and then our training is going to be once the candidates are qualified, it's going to be training about the campaign laws and all of that. So we'll have that on the 26th. We hope all the candidates and anybody who is going to be working with the candidates or anybody who's considering running, you feel free to come. The meeting is going to be here at 7 o'clock on the 26th. It's always a great meeting because Jerry Holland and Beth Fleet do a great job of going through all the things you need to know if you are going to be a candidate. And just want to remind people that we would like to encourage you to consider joining Beaches Watch. If you If you haven't joined, it's $10 for individuals, $15 for families, and it helps support what we are doing and continue to do what we're doing. The next meeting that we have will actually be, our meetings are usually the first Wednesday, but because the next meeting in July is right before the July 4th holiday, our meeting is actually going to be July 10th, the following Wednesday, and it will be at Neptune Beach City Hall, where Neptune Beach is great about letting us meet at their City Hall. And it's going to be a great meeting because we're going to have some of the city managers. We've confirmed Jim Hansen and Jim Jarbo talking about beaches budgets 101. So now's the time when the cities are putting their budgets together, and I think citizens would like to know a little bit more about what is in our budgets and what goes on with the budget process. So we think that'll be a really great meeting. We hope you'll plan to go to that meeting. Now, one other thing, before we move to Representative Adkins, I'm sorry we make you wait, but tonight we are pleased to present our 2013 Friend of the Beaches Award. We requested nominations. We had a lot of really good nominations. We always do. And the recipient let me just say that we present this award to individuals, businesses, or organizations who are making exemplary contributions to enriching the quality of life here at the beach. And this year's deserving recipient is Lillie Sullivan. So let me tell you a little bit about Lillie, and then we'll present the award to Lillie. Lillie is being recognized for her exemplary contributions to enrich the quality of life at the beaches through her efforts to preserve Beach's African-American history and help Beach's elementary school children. The Rhoda L. Martin Cultural Heritage Center building, now located on the corner of 4th Street and South and 4th Avenue South in Jacksonville Beach, was the very first schoolhouse built in 1939 to serve the African-American community of the beaches, stretching from Mayport to Palm Valley, which is a pretty large area. This four-room schoolhouse was in active use until 1999, when the building was saved from the wrecking ball and moved to its current location. As the president of the Jacksonville Beach Elementary Preservation Fund, Ms. Sullivan led the effort to raise funds, obtain grants, and develop plans to restore the schoolhouse to its original condition, as well as add an annex for offices and restrooms. Since the restoration of the schoolhouse, an after-school program was developed that has served elementary school students for the past 7 years, allowing students to gain skills and improve their learning and performance in their regular classrooms. The program has been described by several elementary school principals as the most effective and productive in the community. In addition to the after-school program, the Rhoda L. Martin Cultural Heritage Center has hosted many special art and history exhibits focusing on the historical African-American experience at the beaches, and has hosted health fairs, music celebrations, Women's History Month programs, and anniversary events. Nominator Brenda Durden stated in her nomination, "Literally, Mrs. Sullivan has logged thousands of hours of her free time in service to the center and the beaches community. Lillie is an awesome leader in the beaches community and has without a doubt made the community a better place to live, work, and play." On behalf of Beaches Watch, we're proud to recognize Lillie Sullivan as the 2013 recipient of the Friend of the Beaches Award for her exemplary contributions to enriching the quality of life and to preserving Beaches of African American history and helping Beaches elementary school children.
each other's children. That was the time that I grew up in. For us to do what we do as an organization, and I have some of my board members here, Mrs. Mabel Bass, who's our treasurer, Kay Olin, who's our secretary, one of our historians, and one of our advisory members, and my third and fifth grade teacher, Mrs. Peggy Rice Johnson. I have my family members here. Thank you all so much. This means a lot. When you're working like this, you don't really think, that people are watching. You're just doing what you enjoy doing. So to have you all, to have the beaches watching, thank you so much.
Thank you. This is always the best thing. The best part of what we do is recognizing the good things that are going on in our community. So thank you, Lillie, very much for everything that you've done. And you're an inspiration, so hopefully some other people will want to follow in your shoes, and we'll be presenting them with an award someday too. Okay, so now, where did she go? Oh, okay. Sorry we made you wait. Now I'd like to introduce our guest speaker for tonight, Representative Adkins, who is our representative for the Beaches area. And she is here tonight to give us an update on the 2013 legislative session. So I'll turn over the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to be here with you tonight. It's important that I'm able to come to you and for you to have the opportunity to hold me accountable for the work that I do in Tallahassee. I want to share with you, and I was sharing with this gentleman back here, my dad, he asked me, I was on one of my drives to Tallahassee this session, and he said, well, Janet, he says, is it what you thought it would be? As the dads do. I'm like, well, Dad, to be perfectly honest, no, it's not. I said, I have never worked as hard as I do doing this, but I've also never done anything so rewarding. And so I want to thank you for the opportunity that you've given me to serve you in Tallahassee. And before I forget, I want to recognize Jim Adams in the back. Jim is my legislative aide. He goes with me each week to Tallahassee. So we suffer through the ups and the downs together. And literally, Tallahassee, a good way to describe it is a roller coaster. It's just a lot of ups and downs, a lot of hard work, a lot of long hours, late hours at the Capitol. But again, it's a great honor to serve you. So I'm just going to look at you, and then we'll get this in. So let's start with Florida's economy. And one of the indicators of that is what does our unemployment rate look like? And you can see from August to April of this year how that number has gone down. Clearly, things in Florida are moving in the right direction. If we go to the next slide, it's going to make this slide even more important because this is what I was presenting about a year ago. And so you can see that while we're at 7.2% now, a year ago, May 2011, we were at 10.6%. So I think this clearly illustrates where we were just a year ago, where we are today. Things are moving in the right direction. If we want to have stable and prosperous families, we've got to make sure that they have a job. Because our families aren't going to be stable and prosperous if they don't have a job and they can't bring income into their family. So this is a very good indicator. So when you look at Florida's unemployment rate as it compares to the nation's, historically, Florida has always enjoyed a much lower unemployment rate than the rest of the nation. But in this recession, that turned, and Florida's unemployment rate was higher than the rest of the nation. Now it's come back in line with what we've known historically, and we're now at a less than national average of unemployment. So this just compares Florida, and these were the March numbers, but this compares Florida with some of the other states. So you can kind of compare, how are we doing compared to Illinois, California, and Mississippi? It wasn't that long ago, Illinois had a $13 billion budget shortfall. And they did a couple of things. They raised corporate income tax and they raised personal income tax. And you can see where they were in March a full 2 percentage points higher in unemployment than Florida. So I think that, again, points to the fact that Florida's made some good decisions, and we're now beginning to enjoy some lower unemployment numbers. So the CEO magazine each year will rank each state as what's the best state to do business in. And a few years ago, Florida was ranked number 6. Last year, we're number 2. This year, again, we're number 2. We still can't seem to get ahead of Texas. But, Governor Rick Perry better watch out because we're gunning for him. We're working on it. Ranked number 2 is the best climate for job growth, according to the CEO magazine. So I was first elected to serve in Tallahassee in 2008. And you can see those are shortfalls, the budget shortfalls that we've had to deal with every year since I've been there. This is the first year where we've had just a little bit of a budget surplus. And let me tell you, that made all the difference in the world. It was just wonderful not to have to deal with budget cuts again. So when you look at Florida's $74.1 billion budget, and you say, well, where does all that money come from? There's 3 basic pots of money, 3 basic areas where it comes from. The yellow is the state trust fund. Think of that as dollars that have an intended purpose, like your gas tax. Those should be going to build roads. They go into state trust funds. Then the red is federal dollars. Think of that primarily as Medicaid dollars. Those are dollars that come into the state from the federal government, from your federal income taxes, and then they go to fund programs. Those always come with a lot of strings attached. These are various rules that we have to follow in order to use those dollars. We can't use them any way we want. And then finally in blue is the general revenue. And that's primarily made up of the sales tax revenue. So when you go and you purchase something, this is the area where the legislature has the most flexibility in how we spend the dollars. And so what you can see here is that the general revenue was up $2.1 billion this year over last year. That is very, very good news because that meant that the legislature had more flexibility as to how to spend the dollars. The state trust fund up a little bit, that's good. That means spending is good. Don't ever think it's really good that we get more federal spending, but you can see that it's 37% general revenue, 28% state trust fund, and then 26% for federal dollars, or 35% federal. Okay, so when you look at how the money is spent, the $74 billion budget, that was where the money came from. This is where the money is spent. And you can see that healthcare takes up the biggest chunk, 42% of Florida's $74 billion budget. 42% of Florida's $74 billion budget goes to funding healthcare. And that's primarily Medicaid. Then you look at the other big areas, that's in education. Pre-K making up 18%, 9% in higher ed, so 27% combined going to fund education in Florida. Now, when you look at the general revenue appropriations, and again, this is the area of the budget where we have the most flexibility, then the numbers change a little bit, and education then consumes 53%. So in that area where we have the flexibility and we can say this is how we want to spend the money, then the legislature is saying 53% of those dollars should go to fund education. And then you've got healthcare at 29% of general revenue. So I love this slide because it really clearly illustrates where the money's coming from, where the dollars are going to. And again, you can see healthcare is the biggest bar, and the biggest source of that funding is yellow, meaning from the federal government. That's largely the Medicaid program. Roughly for every 50 cents that Florida taxpayers put in, the federal government puts in 50 cents. So it's roughly half. Then you've got education as the next big area, and you can see it's red, mostly sourced from red. That means it's mostly funded from general revenue dollars. And then just a little bit from the federal dollars, and then even less from the state trust fund. So I get asked the question, it's probably the most common question I get asked, is what about the lottery dollars? Because we see these billboards, billions of dollars spent in education. Some of that money does go to K-12, but a lot of it goes to fund higher education in terms of Bright Futures scholarships. So if anybody here has a graduating senior this year or in recent years, many of them are eligible for the Bright Futures scholarships, and that's where most of the lottery dollars are going to. So this is a 13-year history of general revenue appropriations. And you can kind of see the up and then the dip, and now we're on our way back up again. That to me is another indicator of Florida's economic health. That means that people are out, they're having confidence in the economy, they're spending money, and so these are, and you can see that the 2013 numbers are very close to the line with 2005, 2006. So these are the committees that I served on this past session. Committee assignments are made by the Speaker of the House. Speaker Will Weatherford appoints each of the members to serve on those committees. I was blessed and honored to be able to chair the K-12 Education Committee. And you can see there's a really heavy emphasis on education. I spent a lot of time trying to work on education issues and education reform. So here's kind of a nutshell of what I feel like we accomplished this session. And boy, we worked on a whole lot more than this. There's a lot of other bills we worked on and we came that close to getting it done. But this is what actually passed both the House and the Senate, and now the governor he hasn't yet signed it on the 19th. But House Bill 423, the dyed diesel tax relief. The shrimpers in my area came to me last summer. They got a letter from the Florida Department of Revenue saying, please remit your sales tax for the last 3 years. And anytime you get a notice from the state agency saying, pay us money, you know, bells start to go off. And so we started getting call after call after call in our office. We're like, what is this? We're exempt. Aren't we exempt? We're like agriculture. And so we got Department of Revenue on the phone. We went back and forth. We said, no, you're wrong. And, well, we were wrong, and there was a loophole. And while it applied to pretty much everybody else in agriculture, it did not apply to aquaculture. And so there was nothing we could really do about the history. You know, the Department of Revenue said, we'll work with everybody on payment plans, but we said, going forward, let's see if we can't get legislation passed to close this loophole. And so we were able to get this bill passed. We actually were able to expand it to include not only aquaculture, but commercial fishing. And the history behind this is that Florida's always had a tradition of not taxing food production. We don't tax dyed diesel fuel for agriculture. We don't have sales tax or motor vehicle fuel tax on dyed diesel fuel for agriculture. And so why are we doing it for the shrimpers? Well, the bottom line is, it's probably because they didn't have a good lobbyist in Tallahassee when this was passed. Many of the commercial fishermen that fish in federal waters, those taxes were already exempt if you fish in federal waters. But for the smaller business guy who fishes or shrimps in state waters, they don't go as far out, they were the ones that were getting hurt. So the big guys were taken care of, and it was the small business guy that was being hurt. And so we were able to get this bill passed. That was good. It was very good. And the governor has signed that bill. House Bill 1119, I was asked to file this bill, and I have to say it was perhaps one of the most rewarding bills that I worked on this session. It doesn't do a whole lot in some ways, but in other ways it does, it like moves mountains. All it does in Florida statutes is it changes the word mentally retarded or mental retardation to the word intellectual disability. That's all it does, changes the words. Doesn't change any definition, doesn't change any meaning, just changes the word. But each time I presented this bill in committee, I would have members of the ARC come, individuals with, intellectual disabilities. They would come and they would present. And it was the most moving. One of the members actually said, some of the smallest things that we do are the most monumental. And so in terms of changing lives and doing something that's actually meaningful to people and to change their lives, I was really proud to be able to sponsor this. It was just very rewarding. House Bill 7001 and Senate Bill 1096, this was a repeal of some duplicative, burdensome, outdated regulations for our school districts. It was a task force that the governor had convened, superintendents came together, and Department of Education, and pretty much everybody in education came together and said, yes, we all agree on this. So we got rid of some unneeded statutes. House Bill 1076, that was actually House Bill 7091 that came out of the K-12 subcommittee that I spent a lot of time working on. And this is, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but this bill is going to work to connect the skills of the students with the needs of our employers. And I think this will go a long way to helping Florida's high school students. We followed Bill House Bill 1283. That is a local bill. It pertains only to Nassau County. But basically the rules for having a liquor license for a restaurant in Nassau County was different than every other county in the state of Florida. And so it's made it hard for us to get restaurants like Outback. And so we think we just want to be like every other county in the state. And so we were able to get that real fast. And then the big thing was securing the funding for the ferry. And that was all very interesting, how that came about. Senator Bean had been able to get $500,000 on the Senate side and the Senate budget. I've been able to get $1 million on the House side. His language said it was going to be used for infrastructure, and my language was silent. You didn't use it for anything. And so we're feeling pretty good. We got to get a strong budget position. We're working together. He's working with his leadership. I'm working with my leadership. Everybody knows this is Adkins and Bean's #1 priority. And then all of a sudden, we get a phone call. From Secretary Prasad, the Secretary of the Department of Transportation, and let's make a deal. And so one day at lunch, I went over to the Senate, and I met with the Secretary, and met with the Senator, and one of the staffers at the department, and so we were putting the deal on the table. I'm like, well, but I still think we need to be able to fund operating expenses. Well, they were just completely shut to that idea. We weren't going to make any progress on that. But the Senator and I basically said, sign it in blood, and then we'll agree to remove it on each of the budget sides. And so we were able to go ahead and secure that funding absent this year's budget, which was, I think, a very good thing. Getting assurances up front instead of sending it to the governor for possible veto. So that was perhaps the biggest accomplishment of all, I believe, this session. So education was really the big winner this year in Tallahassee. Had an additional $1.5 billion in education this year over last year. $480 million of that was set aside for teacher raises. So that now goes to the local school boards. The legislature could not appropriate it directly to teacher salaries. Because Florida's Constitution allows for collective bargaining, we have to get that to each of the school districts. Then they engage in collective bargaining with their unions, and then they work out the details, so to speak. But basically what we said is raises for up to $2,500 for effective teachers, up to $3,500 for highly effective teachers. So that's good for Florida students. Roughly a $400 increase on average per student, funding over 6% increase. So when you look at education reform, Florida's engaged in a lot of education reform in the last several years. And you say, well, what has that gotten us? Well, what this shows, this was by the Quality Counts in Education Weeks 2013. They moved us up from the place of 11th place in the nation, to now number 6 in the nation. So that means, again, I think that Florida's moving in the right direction. Are we there yet? Absolutely not. We still have work to be done. But clearly, it's better to be moving up in the numbers than down in the numbers. And so let's talk a little bit about what we did this session. So I talked about Senate Bill 1076, connecting the skills of the students with the needs of the employers. What does that really do? What Florida has done historically, I believe, is to create kind of a one-size-fits-all cookie-cutter approach to high school. And what we're seeing is that that's not necessarily a good thing. We've got some students who maybe don't fit into that mold that we've created. And so what we've done is we've set up 2 different high school designations. It's the same high school diploma for everyone, but with a different designation. One would be a merit designation, the other would be a scholar designation. They would both prepare you for college. You could go to college regardless of which path or which designation you choose. One would prepare you for the university level. The other would prepare you perhaps for the college level, but it would allow you to get an industry certification while you are still in high school. And so when you think about that, when you think about getting real skills that you can take into the marketplace and get a job, that's a good thing. So that's what this bill does. Senate Bill 1388 dealing with instructional materials. This bill will give greater flexibility to local school boards for them to choose their own instructional materials. Instead of some mandate coming down from Tallahassee, this will give them additional flexibility to fit what meets their community's needs. House Bill 7165, early learning, this came on the Education Committee that I serve on, trying to increase transparency and accountability within the early learning school readiness programs. We've seen, some fraud, if you will, within some of these programs. There's some issues in terms of accountability and performance standards, and so this is trying to move that into in the right direction. House Bill 609 dealing with cyberbullying. This was a bill that Representative Reggie Fullwood from Jacksonville filed, and first committee of reference was the K-12 committee. So it was really nice to be able to sit down with the representative to review the bills. Okay, if we tweak it here, here, and here, let's get this bill moving. And so now this bill's been signed. So I'm sure you've all seen, like I have on the news outlets, the tragedy that can occur when someone is bullied. It seems like when it's done remotely and we're not face to face, sometimes it's easier for people to engage in the bullying behavior. And so I think recognizing that this exists, putting some protocols in place for the school districts to deal with it, that's definitely a good thing to do. So next session, what are we going to work on next session? So we've been home for about a month now, and already we are beginning to think about what's coming up, what's coming down the pipeline. This last year we worked on House Bill 1225, which is, I think, just a good bill for small businesses, especially the smallest of the small business. We're going to continue working on that. We're gonna look to expand that bill, and we're gonna hit the ground running in this next session. We got this bill through all 3 committee references this last year, and our Senate partner, Senator Brandis, was able to get it through one committee on the Senate side, and I was really disappointed we didn't make further progress on the Senate. But like I said, we'll continue this next year. What this does is, as small business owners, you have multiple government entities come in and regulate you. Sometimes they do a good job, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they cross the line, and they do things that's outside their authority. They kind of cross over. Well, what happens is when you as a small business owner say, but wait a minute, that's not quite right, that's not what the rules say, that's not what the law says, then their response back to you is, well, it's cheaper for you to pay the fine than to fight it. And you ever hear the phrase, you can't fight City Hall, you can't fight state, if you can't fight City Hall, you sure as heck can't fight state government. Because they have the resources, they have the attorneys, and you recognize as a small business owner, good grief, I'm going to spend $20,000 in attorney's fees. But on the other hand, it hurts your reputation. It's got a long-term cost. So the short term means you're better off to pay the fine and just move on. But the long-term cost, who knows what that long-term cost is? And then you've said and then you've just enabled, bad government. And so what this bill would do is says, if you're a small business, and small business was defined as, help me out, Jim, if I get the numbers right. It was, I think, 25 or less employees and a net worth of $2 million or less. So we're talking about the smallest of small. But if you're a small business owner and you think state government's done you wrong, and you take them on, and you're right, and you win, well, then that state agency's going to pay you attorney's fees. They're going to make you whole. They're going to make it right. And so this is kind of my small business, let's take that government bit. But I think it's important, when you go back to the unemployment numbers, most of our businesses in Florida are small businesses. We've got to have a state where there's predictability, where they know what the rules are, where they know, what the regulations are. And when our businesses don't know, and we've got state agencies that are overstepping their authority, then we need to create that avenue for our businesses and our citizens to fight back. So we're going to continue that fight next session, and I'm excited. I think we're going to have some momentum going into next session on that bill. Middle school reform, I think you're going to see some ideas. I'm hoping that we'll be able to engage with some middle school reform legislation next year. I've got 2 children in public school. My daughter starts high school next year, but my son will be in 7th grade. So I personally experienced the middle grade years, and they somehow they just seem like they're lost years. And so we're trying to get some ideas. If you have any thoughts or ideas as to how we can improve the middle school grades and better prepare our students for high school, then I would love to hear your thoughts and ideas on that. So, go back. Okay, there we go. So let me just thank you for allowing me to be here. We have office hours at the Jacksonville Beach office Monday through Wednesday from 10 to 3. And if you're receiving our weekly updates, that's great. Email me back. But if you're not and you'd like to get those, I write a letter to the editor. We send it out via email every week when I'm in Tallahassee, and I write every word of it just to give you a flavor of what's happening in Tallahassee. It's a very small slice. But if you're not receiving that and you would like to see Jim, or just write down a piece of paper, and I'm going to get your question. There's one more thing I meant to mention. That piece of paper that you have that has everybody's phone number on it, that doesn't have mine. So if you've got a pen and you want my number, I want to give you my cell number. It's my personal cell number. You can call me, you can send me a text message, but my cell number is 904-316-2008. And you can send me an email here, or you can send it to janet@janetadkins.com. I get fewer emails on the janet@janetadkins.com. This email address, sometimes I might get 400 or 500 in a day during sessions, so that one sometimes gets a little full. But you had a question?
Yeah, the next slide that you...
We can go over that if you'd like. You want to go over that?
Affordable Care Act and health insurance, I have some questions about that.
Okay, go ahead. We'll go to the next slide. I thought there might be some questions, so that's why I put this up here. So there's 3 components of the Affordable Care Act. We have the insurance exchange, and so the states have the option whether or not to set up the state exchange or to let the federal government set up the exchange. There was no legislative action taken this year, and absent that, the federal government will be setting up the insurance exchange. There were lots of questions that have not yet been answered, and lots of questions as to how much the cost would be. And so, do you have a question on that?
Yeah, our Republican governor and the Senate supported Senator Negron's proposal, and it would have got us $50 billion over 10 years, cost us $3 billion, and it would have created a lot of jobs. And the Florida House totally rejected it. I mean, our Republican governor, the Republican majority Senate supported it. Why did you help me understand why
Sure,
you didn't?
absolutely. And I think, it's interesting when you look at the actual words of what the governor proposed. It was to take on the Affordable Care Act for 3 years, and then after 3 years to do something else. To me, that is like opening a can of worms. And I don't know how you go back and you undo it, or how you even change it. Now, I understand the argument that in the short term, it would be very good for Florida's economy.
For a million people, too.
The long term, though, I think is where the greatest concern is. That's certainly where my concern is. I mentioned earlier that Medicaid, that right now the state puts in about 50% and the feds put in 50%. And of course, under the Affordable Care Act, they're going to put in 100% for the first 3 years and then 90% thereafter. But that formula, they have complete and total authority about changing that formula. And so it's 100% and then it's 90%, but when they have all the authority to change that formula, then I believe, and I don't know what the timeline would be, but I believe that over a period of time, it would be more like 50%, which is what we have today. So it's a matter of short term versus the long term.
But we're going to pay it in taxes, because all those uninsured people go to emergency rooms. I mean, it's the most inefficient system we've got, and that's what you're supporting.
Well, and so the studies have looked at Massachusetts, And those studies that I've seen, and I'm sure there's perhaps other studies, that show the emergency room usage actually did not go down when they implemented their expansion. Whether it would or it wouldn't, I don't know. Whether we'll be called back into a special session, I don't know.
Well, that's a very important issue for me, and I suspect other people too, so think about that, please.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Where are we with regards to the implementation or not of online sales tax?
Okay, so I served on the Finance and Tax Committee this year. We actually passed a bill. I'd have to go back and look at the actual details because that was so long ago, but we were looking at trying to make that more equitable with the retail. The bottom line of that is that there's some federal laws that prohibit us from really doing what like the Florida Chamber wants done. And so I know they're looking at some legislation in Congress. I'm not quite sure where it is in DC. But that was an issue that we were looking at because when you look at the disparity that is created between those people who have retail stores that are paying property taxes and collecting the sales tax compared with those online, and most Floridians don't know or don't know how they're supposed to remit their sales tax. I think that's an issue that we looked at within finance and tax. But nothing happened this year. Issues that are big like that often take multiple years to get agreement between.
So I think some of the bigger companies have already started charging. I mean, there's other states that have implemented it. You're in your right. But I think in Florida, there's some. I bought something from Home Depot last week, and they charge online sales tax.
Sure. Yeah, if the store, if you're buying something online and the store has a physical presence in Florida, they're required to collect the sales tax. But if they don't have a physical presence, and there's some nuances that you can do to try to tweak that if they've got a distribution center in Florida, so we were looking at some things like that, but it doesn't really solve the problem. It doesn't really get to where we really need to be.
Yeah, because most companies don't like paying tax, so they move their distribution.
And then you have to look at all sides of the argument as to, okay, well, then are we losing jobs because now we've got, because now we've got a distribution center in Florida, but now they're going to move to another state. There's always that, give and take on both sides of the policy argument.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you give us an update on pension reform? Because I think that was something that was discussed this legislative session, right?
It was discussed. It was actually discussed this session and last session. So let me tell you first what we did last session. That pension reform bill requires all state employees to contribute to their own pension plan, 3% of their salary. And that passed, and the governor signed it, and that's been implemented. I think we're still being sued on that bill, but so far, we're prevailing. This year, the plan that the House passed would have moved the Florida Retirement System, FRS, from a defined benefit to a defined contribution, much like the businesses have moved today. Passed the House, did not pass the Senate. So that's probably another issue. Where'd you go? That's probably another issue that we'll talk about next session.
Are you doing anything to help local government with pension problems? I don't know what you can do, it's a real problem locally.
We had another bill. I'm trying to remember the number, 1319. Does that sound familiar? 13. And it was Senator Ring and Representative, I can't remember his name. But that bill also did not pass. And the feedback that I got from Mayor Latham, actually, we were texting and emailing back and forth in the closing days of session. And he's like, please do not pass that bill because it got amended. And it's like, this doesn't help us, this hurts us. Please don't even pass this. So I'm going back to the rep and saying, when you're dealing with your bill, he's like, I don't even like it anymore, it's dead. So a lot of times the things that you accomplish is that you kill things. You know, in that case where I'm communicating with the mayor and it's like, please don't pass this. We had another situation with Senate Bill 1812, I think it was, and it would not have applied to a lot of the counties, but it had, if your population was like 70,000 or less, then your TDC dollars, your Transportation Development Council dollars could be used for public safety. And so then you had all your chamber people who were concerned that now we're not going to have the money for marketing and building tourism, and you know, so we got that one killed too. Yes, sir. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. You did try, and at least the Duval delegation tried to help us with a little pension issue, passing a J bill on to committee. Folks here need to understand the Byzantine nature of the legislature. Basically, the J bill was a request to allow the city of Jacksonville to appoint, or the city council to appoint a third member of the police and fire pension board. That was passed by the Duval delegation. It died in committee because of a chairman that had other interests, future political interests. As we know, that sometimes things like that do happen in the legislature, don't they?
It's an interesting place.
Yes, it
Yes.
is.
You know, so it's, you know, I kind of describe it as like a multi-dimensional chessboard. Because there's things that are happening, and you don't really know why they're happening. And you're trying to figure out why. And it's just,
Well,
It's a little bizarre
there's
sometimes.
fortunately, there are vehicles. That was my resolution that I got passed in the council to pass it on as a J bill. There are other opportunities for us to maybe get that same thing done without the legislature's support or involvement, and we're probably going to move in that direction.
yeah, I love that saying, there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Yes, there is.
So we say that a lot in Tallahassee, because
And
you
to
get
your
told
point,
no a lot. You get told no a lot, and then you have to be persistent until you get told yes.
and I want to vote with thank you on the ferry thing, and it's been a real interesting experience. Your reference to the Secretary of Transportation, Prasad, I don't understand the resistance to operational dollars. You've experienced it. I've experienced it. Lane Brown tackled me because I was getting ready to go over the table on him when he started on some of that. I said, why don't you just give us the operational budget, the same operational budget you give to the Ortega River Bridge, which is just under $500,000 a year.
Yep.
Why wouldn't you do that?
I
And
know.
he didn't have an answer to that, but it's obvious that they're really hung up on not any operational
Yeah,
dollars.
7 times, I'm convinced that, you know, you gotta go at things 7 times to finally get the message across. That's about the 7th time they forget it was your idea, they think it was theirs. But, you know, this is an item, and I was telling somebody, I can't remember who, this is an issue that we're gonna have to continue to fight year after year after year. Whether it's infrastructure needs or operating needs, you know, this is something that we're just gonna have to keep pressing the issue every year to get what we need.
Well,
But listen, leadership, the House leadership knows, they know this is a priority for Janet, and I'm sure the Senate leadership knows this is a priority for Bean, and,
Well, I have a one-year shot, and I'm currently negotiating with the JTA, and I think the ferry should be operated by the JTA, so the operational dollars flowing through should be funded indirectly by the state through the JTA, so we're going to see if we can do some horse trading. So you stay after the capital dollars, because we have $6 million facing us on the landing redo. That's going to be significant.
well, and I know that you've been a great leader on this issue. I mean, you've been there from the start. I remember January a year ago when we first convened, and Maria, you were there. Carolyn, I think you were there.
Right here.
I think you were there. When we brought everybody together. And when you think about where we are today versus where we were in January 2004, we've come a long way. But it's not been without a lot of hard work. So I want to publicly thank you and Maria and Carolyn, everybody who's had a role in this. This has really been a team effort, collaborative effort. We couldn't have, one person alone couldn't have accomplished this. For sure.
Janet,
Okay.
somewhere in the
education bill, it seems that you are not letting evaluations of the teachers for 3 years. Is that correct?
You mean not releasing it to the public?
Yes.
Okay,
Why is that?
So the teacher evaluations comprise about 50, well, the student performance data comprise 50% of the teacher evaluations. And what you do is you look at, in order to have a solid statistical model, I'm going back to my statistics class, you've got to have a sample size that's large enough to make it statistically valid. And so what we do for the teacher evaluations is we take 3 years of student data in order to make it statistically valid for the teachers. Because if we just took one slide for a year, then that would be, perhaps an outlier. And then you would have a high-performing teacher, oops, we had a bad class, and then, you're down here. So we take 3 years. But that's considered part of the teacher evaluation. And so, because it's part of the teacher evaluation, there's that withholding from the sunshine for that period of time. What the issue was the student data, that report that shows. Now, the report, because it's got 3 years, that physical report's not available for that 3 years, but you always have a year rolling off, right? Because you're using the most recent 3 years. So you would have access to the rolling off data, but the actual report that has that 3 years, that 1 year's report would be available 3 years later. Does that make sense? It's complicated.
I understand what you're trying to do, but if I had a child, I would want to know how the teacher was before the child entered that class, or I would say, I'm sorry, my child.
And eventually, because we're at the brand new phase of implementing this, there's that lag time. But once we get past the initial implementation, that data will be available on a yearly basis.
Okay.
That will be. Now, I believe this was the legislative intent from the very beginning, because this is all part of the teacher evaluation, which is protected. There was a court case, and the state prevailed on protecting that information. Now it's gone to appeal, so we'll see what happens in the appeal process. But once we get past that initial implementation, then you'll have that rolling years of data.
Okay.
I mean, I understand because I'm a mom. I've got students in public schools right now. So I absolutely agree with what you're saying. I kind of think we already know who good teachers are, even absent that, but it's good data to have, and it should be available. Mayor, you had a question?
No, I don't have a question publicly. I want to say that, as you said tonight, sometimes it's the small things that are the big things. Publicly tonight, I'd like to thank you for stepping up to the plate when Little Neptune Beach had a big issue with the state. And when I picked up the phone last year and called you like that, you got it taken care of with Pizza Bar and Turkey Day. And again, publicly.
Well, I'll confess, because you had me scrambling a little bit, because, I had to call my contact at Department of Business and Professional Regulation. Well, there's sometimes a lot of turnover. So I'm thinking, my guy had left. He'd gone somewhere else. So I'm like, okay, well, who else should I call? So I'm like going through my contact list, going through my brain, who else can I call? Finally, the person I got, it was her first day on the job. So eventually I got to someone who I knew, who knew me, and they were able to get it taken care of. But, I go back to the very beginning. The only way you get things done in Tallahassee is by having good relationships with people. Otherwise, you're just like 1 out of 120, and good luck. It's those relationships that are built on trust, that's built on effective communication. So I see you, but I saw this hand first.
Yeah, is there any change in the legislature about the health care that the legislature gets that they pay? Because I understand you guys only pay $30 a month for the family for health care plan. And that would be great if everybody in the state
Yeah, that's
did
good
that.
for everybody.
It's just not fair that it singles out the legislature and Senate and stuff have a tax-assisted healthcare plan, and then regular Floridians don't get that opportunity. It's something needs to stop. Either you pay the rate like everybody else does, or you don't have that.
You start taking care of other people.
I'm going off of what Mayor Pruitt said. I know you were always accessible when I saw you. I saw you multiple times while I was at the function. So thank you for being so virtual, and I've enjoyed working with your staff because you were always there whenever we needed you. From a council perspective, thank you very much.
Well, again, one more, go ahead.
Is the $30 figure that this gentleman presented correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Are you embarrassed by that?
You know, it's not something that I'm going to comment publicly on.
I can understand.
Anybody else? Well, thank you so much for having me here tonight, and if we can ever be of any service to you, please don't hesitate to give us a call. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I would like to say this, that in years past, we have reached out to some of our different representatives and asked them to come and do a legislative session update. And we're very pleased. I mean, Representative Adkins is the first one who's done this, and we really, really appreciate it. You are truly, as Mayor Pruitt and Kara Tucker said, very accessible and very open, and we really, really appreciate that. Councilman or President or whatever upcoming president.
Well, you never know, with that bunch of Indians down there, you never know when there might be an uprising, so.
He would like to make an announcement.
19, wow. On June 28th, Friday, June 28th at 4 o'clock, barring some unforeseen event taking place, I will be sworn in as the next president of the Jacksonville Council. And so, invitations automatically go out to all the elected officials. I have a limited number of invitations I can send, but I want you to know that you are welcome without an invitation. It's in Jackson, it's at City Hall, and it's at 4 o'clock. Afterwards, there's a reception in Moco right across the plaza, the Museum of, Catty Corner, right. And you're all welcome, and no, this is not paid for by the city of Jacksonville. It is not paid for by the state, and for sure it's not paid for by the federal government. But one last comment I do want to share with you that Warren Jones seconded my nomination, and he brought up something that I hadn't thought about that really made me kind of proud, and I need to share it with all of you, is that I'm honored to be the first district councilman from the beach to be president of the council, and that means a lot right here. And while I have that position, I hope that you will not hesitate if you think there's something that I can do to help. I'm certainly going to wield as much influence to the benefit of the beach as I possibly can. So if you've got ideas or the like, I know Sybil is going to be, if we can ever get the legislation straight, Sybil will be a beach rep. She may be the first beach member of the library board.
Yes.
For all I know. I've got boards and commissions. That's the other thing a president does, is I've got a lot of boards and commissions, positions to fill, and we need to have more beach people involved in there. So if you've got some particular interest, call Stan Johnson, my executive assistant, and tell him that you're interested in serving on a board or commission, and I'll make sure that you get consideration. Thank you all very much.
Hey, Bill. Will we be able to get our picture taken by the staff photographer?
Okay, so thank you all for coming tonight. Again, thank you, Lillie, for everything that you do. And I want to remind everybody, July 7th would be our next meeting, and it's the Beaches City Budgets 101. It's going to be a good meeting, so we hope you'll come. Have a happy 4th of July, and thanks again for coming tonight.
Hey, Bill.